If I had to bet like long term, like terminal interface, I actually think the terminal interface, say in 15 years, will be a humanoid robot. I think that that will be the terminal interface for these things, that you just talk to your humanoid robot.
Now we're in a world where there's too much information. And how do you piece together the information you need just to take the next step?
Yeah, but you know what also happened a couple of days ago is Claude Code did a git reset hard on some unstaged changes I had.
All right. Welcome to episode 4 of the Forward Pass. And this is our monthly show where us, AI entrepreneurs, we cut through the noise. We're all building products at the frontier, pushing the limits. And in this show, we share real challenges, technical insights, and unfiltered takes on where the industry's headed. So if you're building with LLMs and you want to sharpen your craft, this is the show for you. Let's begin. So this week, we've got a couple of really fun topics. I think one in particular, I think that's like really deep and broad, which is around simulations. And I think we'll touch on Evals there as well, because the two are actually tightly related. We'll touch on models on your phone. There's been kind of a lot of noise recently. Sam Altman recently posted about when will models that have O3 level intelligence be ready on the phone. So I think we'll talk about that. Dan wants to talk about the ultimate interface for AI and whether it's actually a chatbot or something different. We'll talk about Claude Code. We'll talk about the OpenAI meta hiring drama. And we'll talk about whether Apple has a chance in the AI fight. So lots of good stuff coming up. So yeah, let's kick off. Dan, do you want to start us off with the chat interface and whether that's the end state here?
Yeah, thank you, Tyler. I think this is a topic that's come up, I think in this group before and in a lot of popular discourse. The main thing that's interesting to me is how much time has passed without like a real change. When, as we all know, when ChatGPT launched, it was a bit of an accident. It wasn't expected to be this viral hit with millions of users. And it turned out that a chatbot is actually a really damn good interface for a lot of things. Then people started asking, what else can we do? And now it's been a couple of years, maybe 2.5 years now. And still, the absolutely overwhelmingly dominant interface for interacting with LLMs is just like a blinking cursor on the text box, and then it'll maybe do something. We are seeing a little bit of other stuff. I mean, obviously, the images and videos have different interfaces, although it's still a lot of just kind of typing in prompts. Claude Code is extremely stimulating to me. So Terminal being a different interface is very interesting. I think we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But still, it feels like we're just on the tip of the iceberg. I am getting more conviction that there are other really great UIs for AI-assisted software. But the fact that I'm not seeing them, it makes me wonder if I'm missing something. So I'm curious, what do you guys think? Like, are chatbots still going to be dominant, or is there more space for other ideas in the coming years?
I think there's definitely more space. If I had to bet like long-term, like terminal interface, this might sound a little funny, but I actually think the terminal interface, say in 15 years, will be a humanoid robot. I think that that will be the terminal interface for these things, that you just talk to your humanoid robot. So maybe that's wrong. Maybe that's too optimistic or too dystopian, depending on your point of view. I don't know. But I think that once those come out, I think that it'll just be so intuitive to just like, what is the ultimate interface for a human? It's like other humans, right? Like we talk to each other. That's how we communicate. So I feel like we'll just converge on that.
Yeah, I think to me, it's interesting to think about in terms of what people have been exploring. I think Cluely is a really big like insight in terms of like trying to overlay the glasses theory, right? And then like with Apple's Vision Pro, overlays and just kind of trying to put us in that mental state of like, what is it like to actually have something that, and even back then with Google Glass, plus 15 years ago or something like that, like that was just a visceral. Everyone's like, we just don't want this thing yet, and then the other interesting, like I guess audio, like multimodality thing, have been like humane AI pin, right? They were just like literally the pin that you would have and try to like interact with it, right? For some reason, they thought that that was a good idea, coming from like from a pedigree, like Imran used to work with Johnny and all these people, and like it's not like they just kind of thought that this was a wacky idea or some teenagers in the basement type of thing. So that's an interesting, and like almost ahead of its time in a funny way. And I think HomePods are interesting to me too, like audio stuff. And I have a friend who just interacts with just HomePods, just giving it instructions and commands. And so I think, like you say, there is an interesting connection with voice that involves some type of interface. And then as far as like computer to human interfaces, I think there's like a whole nother like psychology involved, like in terms of how we gather information, right? And I think there's a lot of different explosions here. And I think the biggest one that we're sort of witnessing through chat right now, and like I think this is kind of like what's the answer to the next thing that's where the puck could be going, right? Or where the pucks could be going. And to me, it's like, or what's the next turn? I just need to make the next left turn. I don't need to know, 50 miles from now where I need to go. I already have that plan. I just need to like there's too much information in front of me. It's the meme where there's like, there's a parking sign. There's like 15 signs you have to read just to see if you can park there. And that's what it
Right.
feels like right now, And so it's like you have a chat
Mm.
window. You're like, which one do I pick, right? And so I think the better interfaces are going to be the things like not that necessarily it's a computer, but it's like how do you distill the information that you specifically need for the next step in your life, wherever that is, right? And physical
I think
products are still a thing, right? So I think that's going to be an interesting way to see where things could be going.
Yeah, I think the metaphor to road directions is a good one, like applying that across the board. Actually, I mean, going back to what I said about humanoid robots, I think that's like long term, obviously. I mean, we don't even have them yet. Nobody has them yet. So obviously that's long term. I think in the next 2 years or so, I do think voice, kind of part of what I'm saying is that I think voice will be the dominant form factor. Partly because, like, there's this thing Elon Musk got famous for saying a few years ago when he started Neuralink about how, like, we have such high input ability, like megabytes per second, whereas output, it's like we're just typing with our little fingers. He called them meat sticks, which is what was kind of funny about it. But like, it's like bytes per second, like single digit bytes per second, right? It's just not very much. Whereas when you use your voice, I think it's between 2 to 3x faster for most people to speak. So I use an app called Super Whisper, where I just do like Option Spacebar, and then it just brings up a voice transcribing like immediately, and then it just pastes that into whatever text box I have open. So it's kind of just a really nice middle ground where it doesn't require that I'm using like the voice mode of whatever thing. I'm just using this separate app that's basically transcribing for me. And I use that, I would say 80% of the time now. The only time I don't use it is when I need to like refer to something specific, like the name of a function or something, and I want to actually be like that exact string, and then I'll just like end my super whisper, and then I'll just paste that thing in, and then I'll just keep talking. So that's like my current workflow. And yeah, it's definitely faster because when you're prompting a lot, that difference really makes a difference. 2 to 3x speed up is big. I think the reason we haven't seen that take off yet, my theory is that like they're just dumber. Like the current latest voice models are like 4.0 level. We don't have an O3 level like native voice, as far as I understand. Like OpenAI's real-time API is like a year and a half dumber than the state of the art. So I think that's ultimately just a latency issue, and I think we'll get there. Like once latency on reasoning is as fast as latency on or like it'll never be as fast, but like it's fast enough that like the gap between when you need it to respond as like a human would of like a second or two, then I think we'll just use voice.
Yeah, +1 for the GPT 4.0, conversational assistant just being too dumb for me these days. When it came out, I thought it was great. I would just pull it up while driving and say, explain what is the relationship between like blood pressure and headaches, and I'll just have this dialogue with this thing. And
Yeah.
now I'm so used to models that are so much smarter. I don't want to talk to that dumb thing anymore. Like I just don't trust it. It's not as intelligent. So where's my just kind of very simple audio chat app thing with O3 or Gemini 2.5 Pro? It's kind of weird that that doesn't exist.
Yeah, I think it's just a latency issue, which means it'll be solved because we're riding the curve down.
Right. I want to push back a little bit on the audio, either as a humanoid robot or just in a more basic way. You guys, I'm sure, are thinking and reading about context engineering as kind of the new buzzword. It's not prompt engineering, it's context engineering. I don't understand how to do context engineering with audio because it's very hard for me to like copy paste. Let's say I'm using Claude code and I'm like, reference this file and make it do the
Yeah.
thing that is going on in this other file. Like I only know how to do that using a keyboard and a mouse. I don't know how to
Yeah.
say words that would cause that to show up in prompt. Like how do you get around that?
I agree with that. I would say like you're a power user, Daniel. I'm talking more about like the consumer. I'm talking about
Okay.
like your aunt Jane or whatever. Like, what is she gonna do in a couple years? So you're a power user. I think the power users will always have like using like I don't think the average person is going to be doing context engineering. Like they're just not. They're just going to be like talking to these things and finding out things about. I don't know. That's so that would be the distinction.
How about
I
we
was more
kind of
referring to
spell
the
out a little
average
bit
user.
more like what context engineering is, so that some of the audience maybe who have been missing it because they've been heads down a little bit. And
Yeah,
where it
Dan,
kind
how
of
would you
came from,
define
and
that?
yeah.
Great point.
I'd like to
Great
hear
point,
from
Ray.
Ray. I think I know what it means. Like I know what it means in my work, but I'm not sure I know what the popular consumption. Like I see these words, and I'm like, I think I know what that means based on what I spend all of my time doing. And some of the products that I build have, I think, context engineering as a first-class citizen. Like choose what you should be referring to and what you should be building on for every next iteration of what you do. But I think it has a broader meaning. Yeah, Ray, what is context engineering to you?
Yeah, I think kind of in the same boat. I've been kind of getting like peripheral messages. And is this the is this the thing that came out of Andre Karpathy's talk at YC? Okay. Yeah, it was like a closed door talk
Yes.
and then was later recorded and then published, I think, on YouTube that you can go ahead and watch. And he's basically just giving advice to these people who are young entrepreneurs who got accepted to the latest Y Combinator, and they're basically an investment firm, and they're heavily invested right now in a lot of these AI apps because this is like the next big opportunity, obviously. And the advice that these young builders are getting are from like Andre Karpathy, who's like leading up this whole effort here, as far as like, having worked at Tesla and worked hands on, and it's like whatever this guy says, usually like industries move, and everyone kind of moves in these directions. And with context engineering and what we were doing in the past, and his like bigger thesis here is that you basically have this system where you put English in, this black box thing does stuff, and then something else with English comes out at the other side, or some type of thing with economic value kind of comes out on the other side. And previously, that would take code to put stuff into it, and then you would have to like write these types of programs and stuff to realize that. But now it's even like an easier abstraction. And so, whenever you're putting something into like a language model or these types of systems like ChatGPT, it only has so much memory, like, just like you're talking to another human being across the other side. To keep that in your mind and then keep these concepts going so that you can kind of do some stuff. And so, what everyone's been discovering is that whenever there seems to be a change in terms of the value of output that comes out on the other side, depending on how much information you manage and like the types of information you have inside of this like little window of information that you can give to a language model. And then the output can actually be extremely valuable. And so sometimes in some systems, you can shove a whole bunch of stuff in, but that actually may make the output really not useful. And and a lot of times now, with the way that the models are developing, Google has some latest models that allow you to have like a million context window type of thing. And so previously, companies would have to spin up these like big solutions maybe a couple years ago that required multiple databases and sharding and a bunch of different things. And all you have to do now is maybe just dump in a whole bunch of transcripts and medical records or whatever you need to do, ask the language model to do something, and then it can actually output something that's really useful for you. And so, depending on what you put into this language model now can actually determine the output that you can get. It's as far as like managing whatever's in the context and so forth. But that's kind of what I understand as a high level is like what a context is, and then engineering. What's the right thing to do at the right time. How that has evolved to today is like people who are writing software like in Cursor. People have noticed that performance isn't the same, even though they're using the same language model. So you can have a language model like Claude Sonnet, and then you can use Claude Code, and you get two vastly different experiences, even though it's the same underlying model. And then so something like Cursor, basically, for those who are writing software, it'll try to read your code base and use other types of things that are doing in this app. It'll take little snippets of things and build its own little relative context, kind of like building a recipe. And then they would feed that over to the language model and say, hey, now go do this task that the user is asking. And then if you have something like Claude Code, which is running in parallel, it has its own little agentic system that's going in the background, building up a different set of context. even though it's going to the same model, one can actually output a whole different set of instructions or different sets of code or whatever output. And right now, I'm actually preferring the output from Claude Code in some funny ways more often than
Yeah,
I
well,
am Cursor. Yeah.
let's transition to that. Let's talk about Claude Code. That was one of our new topics. So let's pin context engineering. I think we'll see over the next month or two, like whether that term sticks or whether it's kind of just a little bit of a buzzwordy thing. But yeah, we could talk about that probably for a while. But yeah, let's talk about Claude Code. Daniel, you said that you've been getting value out of that. Did I understand that right? Have you been using it? Jesus. Oh my God.
Which I did
That's
not. It's
insane.
funny because it's clearly built very defensively, which is very much in the style of Anthropic, where it's very like it excessively asks for your permission. It's like, oh, I want to like echo something or just read this file. Can I have permission? I'm like, yes. Why would you need permission for that? And then it just starts running Git commands without asking my permission, and then it's too late and things are just gone.
Crazy.
I've
That's
heard some
nuts.
other stories, one from one of my employees, some that I see in the wild on X. Claude Code is amazing. I'm a big fan of it. It is more dangerous than I thought. Like that only happened after I've been using it for some weeks, and then I realized that that could happen. Kind of thought I knew my way around like the Claude MD and the styles. And the more I learned, that the rabbit hole goes deeper. It's superficially a great product. I think down the rabbit hole, it is a great product, but it's complicated, it's messy, it's dangerous. Like the way that it's better or worse than just an agent running in Cursor is quite nuanced. It's totally fascinating.
I've found it so hard to use. I mean, this might be like my hot take here. If my humanoid robots take wasn't hot enough, I just can't. I just can't get it to work for me, like ergonomically. Like, I just feel like for Cursor, like I have all of my. I'm in my coding environment. Like I can click on variables and I see where they came from. Like, how do I go to a terminal now and like try to like? It's just like I feel like I'm going back to like 1999 when people used to code in like Vim. Like, why would I do that? Like, it's insane. I mean, I get that like in the limit, you would want it to just be like, oh, here's what I want you to do. Just go do it. And then you don't even have to worry about it because like coding is no longer even needed at some level because these AIs are so good. But we're not there yet. We need this middle ground where like it actually, I see a diff and then I can like click on the variables or like run that. I don't know. I just, maybe I'm not using it properly. Ray, I know that I've seen your posts that you've used it a lot and you have a lot of like ways to get the most out of it. Seems like Daniel, you
brought that up
have as well. But I just personally find the terminal, moving to the terminal to try to write my code, I just feel like that's such a big downgrade that it would have to literally be like 10x smarter for me to make up for that like massive loss in the ergonomics of like all of the things that my IDE does, like syntax highlighting and like formatting my JSON and like 500 other things and all my plugins and every language that I have. Like, I'm not going to give all that up. I'm sorry. Like, so for me, I have not made the switch at all.
Yeah, I'm not trying to sell you on this, but when you integrate it with Cursor, you can do /IDE in Claude Code, and then you can say I'm integrated with VS Code or whatever your whatever your IDE is, and then I think it does Xcode as well or something. That's where you can actually do like an option click, and then like in the actual output, and then it punches you right into that file in your VS Code environment,
and then you can right.
Yeah, so that's what I'm doing. I'm reviewing diffs, everything in Cursor. It's so much easier, just like you say, the highlighting and all that stuff for me. I don't have to go really full Vim style. Yeah,
that's a great
and
tip.
then
Yeah, I don't know why
you can highlight files in the IDE itself, like in Cursor, and then start chatting with it. So instead of having Cursor's, agentic flow, I'm literally just it actually sort of installs itself as like a little icon at the top, and it can be on the side or you can pop it out as a window and so forth. So yeah, super handy.
Got it.
Yeah, you're almost there. I think the other thing
I just went on a rant and I just didn't know about the /IDE command.
Well, no, I mean,
I think you're in the same boat as other people.
Yeah, no, I knew about that, but I haven't used it. I have my editor open. I'm also using Cursor, but I haven't integrated it. And so to get around the kind of diffs thing, I just do lots of commits and then just kind of look at the diffs that way. I haven't gone the full way because I actually am using the terminal really for the terminal. So, why go back? I mean, I'm the type of developer that has always had the terminal open. I never use the terminal that's in an IDE. I just always have the terminal open. I'm just more comfortable that way. And
I agree.
For the project I've been working on most recently, I just have like a lot of stuff to run. One of my engineers today was like, Dan, what are you doing? Just like, we fixed all this. Like, it's all just one Docker command now. But when I first tried to get up in this apps environment, that one Docker command wasn't working. And I'm like, okay, fine. run Redis, run Supabase, like run my dev server, run the fast API server, run my salary workers. I just have all of these like little terminals
Yeah.
open. And I kind of like that more than Docker anyway, because it's all just like I run the thing, I can put in like my debug params, I can just see what it's doing. Like that's how I learned to code, that's how I code. And so the fact that the Claude code is in there is amazing. I'm like, flush the celery queue. I'm not even sure how that even works, but it knows how to, it just does that. And it just flushes my celery queue. And then I can see it updating in my little celery running instance.
And I'm going to blow your mind if you haven't checked this out yet, but it's the concept of hooks. They just announced this in the last like 48 hours.
I saw the headline. I didn't know what that was referring to.
Yeah, at each step, either at before the tool use, after the tool use, whenever it's sent as a notification, or when like Claude code is done, you can have a bash, anything bash command line run. So if you want to execute scripts before a tool use call or after a tool use call, for example, to log which tools were called, or if a notification is popping up, instead of waiting for you to interact, you can just have it say, run a shell script, or run a shell script that would call Apple script that would pop up a window for you. And then, of course, you can use Claude Code to write the scripts for you really fast. And if you have monitoring, for example, like if you're kicking off something like you're saying, if it's doing this agentic call and then run this script, so it does a log monitoring, it kicks off this, and you're like listening, and then that could feed back, because then there's like a couple callbacks that Claude Code will do and the shell will do, and it'll pick those up, and it can actually stop the agent from proceeding, and it just keeps going until like it it meets a certain criteria in your script. So yeah, the possibilities just kind of, like you say, exist. The rabbit holes just continue. And then you can have that script to protect it from doing that git revert thing, which is kind of, I think, why they put this hook in, because you probably needed that.
Yeah, well, I guess I've been doing the lazy version of that, just like I haven't been doing I have my IDE open, but I haven't integrated. I just have in my Claude MD, like, here's all the commands to run. And so I'll just use natural language. So I'll say, like, when I start off a thing, okay, we're building this feature or whatever, I will say, at the end of everything you do, run the linter, and then like just build the dev server and just look for errors. And it will just read my documentation and just run those commands for me. But only like in some sort of like kind of poor man's way, it's not hooked up to actually do that. It just reads my docs and it just sees the commands and it just runs them, and it just kind of works. Right. But it doesn't always do them. And I've had the funny case that I've seen other people complain about, where it like claims to have run the tests, but it actually didn't run the tests. Like I don't know, like messed up the command or something, so the thing exited, and it's like, oh, there's no errors. And I'm looking, it's like, there's no, where are the tests? Like, you didn't run the tests. You said you ran the tests, but you didn't run the tests. So I think having the webhooks or no, just some normal hooks, such that I can see that output and like guarantee that it is running certain things at certain times. Because I've already grown to depend on that. I just hadn't like properly hooked it up.
Yeah.
You can get started just by doing /hook. Yeah, /hooks. Yeah.
I am definitely going to try that after this. Yeah.
That's a really good tip, Ray. You are really in on the details of that stuff. So great insight, Ray. It feels to me like sometimes you end up kind of micromanaging these things. I actually find in my workflow, one of the biggest gaps is like, this is just on me, but like when in Cursor, I like set it off to do something more complex that's going to take like 2 to 5 minutes. And then I just like should just keep working. But instead I'm like, oh, now I have nothing to do. Like, let me just check my phone or whatever. And then I end up like, and then that's like, it's actually like my workflow gets interrupted by that more than it should. Like, obviously that's just my own discipline, and I should just, but it's hard for me to like in that little moment where it's too short to like do something else. But like, it's long enough that I usually don't just like sit there watching it, and so then I end up getting distracted, and then sometimes I come right back, but sometimes I'm like, wow, 10 minutes went by, that was a waste of time, and then like, it's almost like a strange workflow there, because I'm used to just like being in the mode of coding. But then now when these agents are like running these longer tasks, maybe haven't taken the leap yet that I'm like triggering off multiple agents at the same time in parallel. I know you could do that in Cursor and Claude Code, but like for me, I guess I just still think linearly about my work, or maybe I just can't have enough context in my head where I'm like context switching, like, oh, now I'm going to have you do this like front end task or something. I don't know, like, but I'm worried about like conflicts between the agents. And so for me, that's like my biggest gap right now, is like having to sit there and wait for it to finish.
I kind of use that point to start doing QA, like put my QA hat back on. Because when I worked at Apple, like that was pretty much like the workflow. It's like you're always putting on the QA hat and you're figuring out, and it's not to write unit tests. I found like the actual integrated test to be more valuable, like that I would test by hand. So it's just kind of like, okay, the code is done or it's executing a task. So then I kind of step back and take that time to kind of revisit the architecture a little bit in my head and start playing out all these scenarios. It's like, okay, if I'm a user and I just fix the onboarding flow, and then like I still need to do this type of thing, like what's still left in my task list? And then I just start yapping off like a list of things just that I still need to do. Right. And it's like, okay, I still need to do this. I can't forget about this because I know I'm going to get distracted or something's going to happen where I forget about it. Right. So it's like, as it's kind of like, it takes a while to get into, like you're saying, in that flow. And so I
Yeah.
just kind of continue to like look for peripheral tasks. Not that I'm actually executing. I actually prefer to just keep a focus because I want to review the code that comes back when that round trip happens. It's just kind of like, okay, here's some other
Mm.
things that are in the QA mind that I still need to look at, or I still need to kind of develop, or just have somewhere jotted down. So it's just kind of, or just take the time to just rest. Sometimes just resting is good.
No, gotta check Twitter. That's the only thing I can. That's my rest, Ray. No, just kidding. Yeah, that's good advice. I think it's just a new part of my workflow in the past 2 months that I've noticed is kind of a gap for me. So I think saying it out loud actually here is helpful for me to be like, this is the problem I need to solve for myself, to be like actually getting like the 3x productivity as opposed to just kind of being a different version of like similar productivity level, if that makes sense. Okay, cool. So let's talk about the OpenAI Meta situation. I don't know how much we have to add. I don't know if any of you guys got the $100 million offer from Zuck personally. But if not, then I guess we're just gossiping and speculating. So let's just spend a few minutes on that. I personally think it was an example for me watching that drama a little bit. The 20 minutes a day I spend on Twitter and just seeing it every day for a couple of weeks. How like um, reactive like the internet is, and they don't just kind of like let things play out. Like the first week, everyone was like, Sam Altman's a genius. He like framed it perfectly, and now like $100 million, like Zuck has to offer $100 million to everyone. And then like a week later, everyone's like, Sam Altman is fucked. He just like ruined, like he lost all of his best people. And it's like, oh my god, like you guys are crazy. Like just let it play out. Like just I don't know. So to me, it's like a good example of like the tech Twitter. It's almost like moving too fast, and like people need to say everything every single day. They need to have something to say, and so I'm like, who knows? I mean, who knows if hiring like 10 or 20 like of the best people from OpenAI is even like going to impact OpenAI's trajectory? Like, you could make arguments both ways, So it's like it's just very hard for me to understand how these things are going to play out. I think people love to just like watch the drama, which I do too. I think it's kind of entertaining, but like nobody knows how it's actually going to play out in the long run for like AGI or who gets there or open source. I mean, Zuck could just stop doing open source like tomorrow. Like, who knows? You know what I mean? So I actually personally try to tend to avoid spending my headspace on stuff like that, and focus just on like, okay, what are the products I can build right now with the tools that are available out there right now, and like where do I expect that to, where's the alpha in like the product development tooling? That's what I'm doing, rather than like the drama of who's getting hired. But that's my take.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
I
I think
think I look at it. Go ahead.
kind of
Yeah.
explain a paradox there in that, using your phrase array of, skating to where the puck is going. As builders, we do need to have a view on where AI is going so that we can build stuff that makes sense, not just now, but 6 or
Fair
12
enough.
months from now. And
Yeah.
for example, a question you might have is, to what extent should I be using open source models versus closed sourced ones? And if you want to answer that question, not about today, but about 6 months from now, you need to know what Mark Zuckerberg is up to. So it's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
it's
Fair
not a
enough.
complete distraction. Like, it is relevant
Yeah.
to our actual choices and our actual development practices,
Yeah.
which unfortunately makes it even more poisonous, because then you can get you need to know like what's going on at Meta.
Exactly. Yeah, that's very well said. It's like that mirage of like, this could be valuable, but it's not just like getting angry about like, the big beautiful bill or something where it's like, I no, that doesn't affect me at all. I mean, I'm sure it does, and I'm maybe a bad example because that will affect everyone. But like in terms of like, there's nothing I could do about it. To me, that's the distinction. Is not like, is this valuable information? Yes, there's all kinds of valuable information that could impact us. It's more like, is there anything I can do with this information right now? And sometimes you're right, Dan. That distinction is hard to make because it's unclear. Maybe it is actually valuable to know that like Zuck is cooking, and so they're going to have good open source, and so I should use Maverick instead of DeepSeek. Like that's a real practical consideration, but usually it's less valuable than you think. That's my take, personally.
Yeah, I think it sort of also loops back to the original topic of interfaces and where AI is going to, right? We're all trying to answer that. And then if like to me it just kind of solidifies the race. Like there was a man to the moon mission, right? So it's like who can get the man to the moon first, right? In the world, and I feel like the man to the moon mission here for AI is literally are the artificial super intelligence. And so, like, once that happens, then what happens with our products, right? And I always think about what Dario Amodei says from Anthropic and says, like, just assume, like, in the next, because the models will just keep getting smarter. I think that happened last year when Claude Sonnet 3.5 came out with Cursor, that just kind of boomed this whole vibe coding era. And then, with Claude Sonnet, like 6 months later, and then, and then again, 3 months after that or something. And so is it like every 3 months to like then 1 month, like the models will just get so smart. And then I always think about it as far as like features that I'm doing, and am I building features that I can that mean that like whenever the models get smarter, then my apps or adaptations get better. And one thing I maybe wanted to talk to you, Tyler, a little bit about, kind of changing the topics a little bit, is just how do you think about products, especially when you're dealing with things with memory and you're doing recall, and like how are you approaching maybe like this type of era? Because I feel like 2 years ago I was studying how to make RAG systems and how to make stuff so like I can put it like on a Pinecoast vector database, and you're like learning about ranking and re-ranking and evals, and there's a lot of like buzzwordy things. But I feel like Google Gemini dropping a 1 million context window and actually working really well kind of throws a lot of this other infrastructure out the window, in some ways. And it's like, I feel like every couple of years, you sort of, something new can happen in the model like this. What be it reasoning, be it context windows, be it some new research from Meta that comes out that we don't know yet or something.
Mm.
And it's just kind of curious about your take because you do a lot of building and you have like an app that's in the App Store too, and maybe talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, well, so just to close the piece on Meta, I would actually say that like I agree that like the timeline for AGI or superintelligence is relevant to all of us. I actually think Meta taking some of the best people from OpenAI actually makes me have what like slower timeline, a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit, right? Because it's like imagine there's 500 like super smart AI researchers who are like best in the world, and if they're all at one place, you're probably going to get there faster versus if they're all spread out. I mean, maybe that's like it heats up the competition somehow, but like my expectation would be if they're spread out, you're going to get there slower because you don't have as much like force on one company just having all the people. So that would actually, the fact that it's almost like distributing the talent makes me think that it'll happen a little bit slower. But it's not a major update. I could easily see that being wrong, and it actually ends up being faster because people are like hustling more. Or there's more capital that goes into it and says we have to hire the fastest people, or like there's now a stronger incentive to like become one of those $100 million people, and so more people become that or something. I don't know. There's all kinds of second order effects.
I think it just boils down to taste.
What do you mean?
So, out of all the different things that researchers are doing, there are little strings that they pull out that say we should chase and double down on this research, like the reasoning models, right? Like,
Research taste. Oh, I see what
yeah,
you mean. Yeah,
research taste,
right.
yeah. And then
I see.
product taste too, right? That kind of goes hand in hand. It's like,
Yeah.
because I think that GPT 4.5 flop was kind of a signal for that. I feel like parameter wise and everything, they were all thinking that that was going to be like GPT 5, right? Like God level thing. And then it just kind of, it does well for writing, but slow and all these other types of attributes. And if they just only did that and said, we're not doing this reasoning stuff and generating data and, who knows what, they could have just missed this whole thing. And then like DeepSeek could have just eaten their lunch, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think to your question around like how we do like, so we're doing therapy for the audience. My company, we're doing AI therapy. In terms of how we're solving like long horizon, I think that's actually, you know, hopefully if you've listened this far, you can tell I'm pretty open and share my opinion on whatever I think. But I would say with that, we're actually a little close to the best about how we do that. So I'd rather not share yet. Maybe someday we will, but that's kind of our secret sauce. And so I think that's like probably the only thing I would not want to share right now. I do think that RAG is not the long-term solution to that problem. I would say that.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with RAG. I have the same thought as you, Ray. It seemed very important 2 years ago. I don't know what's going on with it now. I will push back on the like Gemini million token context window. we still see huge returns to getting all that crap out of there and just putting only good information in
Yes.
prompts. And to me,
Yes.
that's kind of the context engineering, or what I
Yes.
was saying earlier about how this is very relevant for me before that buzzword came around. If we can remove stuff from prompts, we just get better performance by focusing on what's good. That
Yep.
is just a hard problem. I think you also, Ray, you kind of gave the proof of this power in your description of how Cursor versus Claude Code can be different with the same LLM. Like they're both going into your source files and taking like method signatures and source maps, or dependency trees, or God knows what, putting it into the context window. And Claude Code just seems like clearly much better at that. And I think it's not because it has more; it's probably because it has less, if I were to guess. And so yeah, if you want to understand like a long PDF and you want everything, then great. The million token context window is useful. They're totally very valid use cases worth billions of dollars, I'm sure. But for typical use cases, I think that pattern from 2 years ago still holds. Like try to get what you need in the prompt and no more, which is very, very hard to do. But if you can engineer that well, I think that there's still clear quality returns in all sorts of different domains.
I strongly agree with that. I think the question is just how do you get that good stuff in there, and whether RAG can be maybe part of the solution for some unique cases. But I think in general, it's usually not sufficient. But I actually think this is where let's talk about simulations now, because I actually think that it relates to this, because ultimately, the way that you're going to be able to make something better is whether or not you're able to know, essentially, whether you're able to do science, right? Like, given everything else being the same, I'm now going to remove this one part of the system and see if it does better. That's like an ablation. That's like the scientific method, essentially. Or a similar thing would be like, I'm going to add this thing and see if it does better. And so then I think you get directly into simulations and evals, which are not the same thing, but they are kind of tightly related. It's kind of like a hand in a glove in some ways. If you're able to simulate either a user using your system or whatever kind of other like endpoint you have to simulate in order to like understand the behavior, then you're kind of off to the races on at least being able to then read outputs and like assess quality level. And that's then you just using your own human brain as an eval. But like you're then able to actually like run proper experiments and not just like sit there like typing like the same thing in, but with slight tweaks or whatever. And so if you're able to use like an LLM to actually simulate like an end user of your product, then I think that's like a crucial first step to getting smarter over time and being able to like start to get a grapple on like how do we make this system better, which is the question you were kind of asking, Ray. In order to do that, you kind of have to like put constraints on it, because if every single time you try to answer that question, it's like, oh, this was a different batch of users, and we shipped 3 updates since then, and we're not sure which one is having an impact. Like, there's just too many variables to know what's going on if you're not able to kind of like simplify that question. And I think that simulations are a crucial part of doing that.
That's interesting, because it makes me think about the Omni models from ChatGPT and like why some of these video models like generating these Ghibli images are so good. Because from what I understand, it has a simulation of all these things in its in its context of some way, and it's simulating a world, and it's able to kind of build that perspective in some ways. And I feel like that's a really good visual for me, like metaphor, like you're saying. If you can tap into that simulation vibe that these models have, then you can kind of pull some of that interesting expertise out of it. I don't know, like and kind of
Mm.
go down this route, but also, yeah. How do you go about then, like, I guess, like, what's the 80/20 for like metrics, right? It's just like, I feel like this can go down a lot of different rabbit holes, as far as like what are the things that you track maybe that could be very important in the simulation, like how do you know that you're like,
Yeah, well, I think it'll be dependent upon each. I think you need some sort of grounding. Like one of the key ideas in evals is like grounding. So like, do you have something to compare it with? So there's a number of ways you could ground it. One could be like user ratings. And so you're trying to eval like actual users, real users, like using the system. And then you don't give your system like the user thumbs up or star ratings or whatever form of ratings you have. Maybe it's like a share or something like that, whatever indicator that they liked it. You don't give your system that, but you then work towards it becoming correlated with that. And that's like a really good way to ground your eval. Another way to ground it is just a human expert. And obviously, those are not mutually exclusive. You can do both. But ideally, you want it to be highly correlated with whatever your human expert says. And there's actually some context engineering for a human expert to be able to understand like where they're at. Like, for us, it's therapy. And so we have like human psychologists who are experts looking at our stuff and making sure that they understand like the history of this user so far and things like that. Otherwise, they won't have a good rating, the human, if you don't kind of give them the right context. So there's also kind of an art to that. But those are, I think, two ways to ground the system. I'm sure there's many others, but those are two I'm familiar with. But if you don't have that kind of grounding source of truth, then it's easy to kind of just build an eval that's like hill climbing you to like a hill that doesn't exist or like a hill that's not actually better. And then I think the simulations can be another way to do that. It's almost like a way to get more data. So it's a little bit different than grounding, but yeah, grounding is important.
Well, if we believe models are getting better and we believe the bitter lesson, which I guess on the forward pass we do, yeah. So right now, if I just took a video of someone using mental and just fed it into a multimodal model and said, "Is this a good therapist? Why or why not?" It probably doesn't have enough judgment or taste to be as good as a real user. And so if it, whatever it said would be like kind of interesting, maybe you would find like really gratuitous errors. But it wouldn't be like, it really should have pushed them in this direction, or our text is kind of hard to read, or whatever is going on in that session. But if we believe that it's getting better, maybe the 80-20 here is to just let the model decide what's good and bad. Again, I don't think that would work particularly well right now, although even now it might be kind of interesting. But if they get better, if you instrument all these metrics, it's kind of because you kind of have to put your own opinions into it about what you think is important. But a smart model is effectively like a smart human. And the right way to do user interviews with smart humans is to not say, rate it in all the following ways and answer all these specific questions, is just to give the thing to the user and say, try this and let me know what you think. Like, don't constrain them, just like give them the chance to say what they really think. Um, and as someone who has not instrumented anything for the things that I'm building, maybe it'd just be convenient for me if I never had to do that, and I could just, give it to a multimodal model and say, do you think this would solve a problem? Imagine you have this problem, do you think this would have helped you solve this problem? And get some real value out of it without doing all of the like laborious instrumentation and analytics and user metrics and all the grounding that you're discussing, Tyler.
I think maybe there's an 80-20 there. I think if you actually want to hill climb, meaning like you're actually like getting significantly better and ideally even like superhuman over time, you're going to need more than 80% quality, so to speak. Like, I don't think that 20% solution will get you there. I think there's a lot of like false hills to hill climb on, so to speak. You can end up just kind of confabulating into bullshit territory. So I think for us, like if you actually want to help people with their mental health, which is a hard thing to do, even for a human expert who's trained for 20 years, like you got to hill climb on something really solid. So that's kind of how we see it. But it depends on the type of problem you're trying to solve, right? Like if you're just like writing silly tweets for somebody, like yeah, like you don't need to do all that. Or, I don't know.
So I'll give you an easier problem to solve. The other thing this reminds me of is, again, coming back to my favorite frenemy, Claude Code. It is nice to give it a regression test, and there's new ways of giving it MCP servers to let it use browsers and stuff. I ended up having Claude Code just kind of build a regression test for me using like basic headless browser stuff, so it can actually like run my web app and actually like click buttons and get to various states and inspect it. It was going decently well, although I ended up kind of abandoning that because it was kind of working, but it was not really worth it. I think for like more serious software that is being built on for many months, it would be worth spending many days setting that up. But that was a kind of simulation. Like it was more like a regression test. It was more like do this, then do this, do this, and then verify this state. And the thing that was different about it is that Claude was helping me build the test. I wasn't building the test and saying, now pass it. I'm like, okay, this feature means that this thing is supposed to trigger when you do this. Go update the test so that it checks that it actually does that, and then use the test to verify that you've implemented the feature correctly. So we can kind of do both ends of it. But I think if you just take this to its logical extreme, it is kind of like a simulation of the user, because the user is also going to click that button and it's supposed to do something, and then the user is supposed to verify it. I was never asking in a regression test, is this good? I was just saying, did it work? But how much different would it be for me to put in a regression test like, is this good? And once that gets to a certain quality level, I mean, again, it's not going to do therapy, at least not yet, but maybe it could do tweets or like other simpler things. And so I can almost kind of imagine a continuous spectrum between testing and simulating.
That's very well said. I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes me think about lots of things. You just have like a O3 model that's just autonomous and can build its own tools.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Well, I think one of the benefits you get with evals, if you're doing model graded evals, which I think to really hill climb, you kind of need that. Otherwise, you're just spending tons of money on human experts forever. But yeah, so like if you have model graded evals, like there's a nice asymmetry where like if you have an application that has any latency constraints or cost constraints at all, then you're probably not going to be using the absolute limit of intelligence on like the inference time at when your users are actually using it, or at least not for every single subtask that you have in the stack, maybe only for some. Whereas in the eval, I mean, there's still an economics piece because, you know, you have to spend money on the eval, but generally you can just like put the most intelligent thing that there is on it to eval. And so that asymmetry can actually mean that your eval in some sense is like stronger than like the final production model, but then you're like hill climbing and fine tuning that final production model to essentially approach. It's actually like in some ways like I think it's like technically equivalent or similar to like distillation, which is what they do to take a bigger model and make it the smaller model smarter. Like I think that distillation is a little bit of a simpler technical process, but like a really good model graded eval that you're then hill climbing on for your inference model that you actually use that's smaller is similar to distillation conceptually. Um, you're basically just taking the good examples from your data set and then saying like these are good and don't ignore the bad ones. But you get that you can basically use like this the absolute smartest thing there is out there, which is actually why I think like regardless of whether you're using the smartest models, you should, as a builder, you should want the smartest models to get smarter. For this reason is probably the top one I would say, but there's also other reasons why having the existence of a very smart model can help you make your system that uses like, you know, Maverick, whatever the medium sized Maverick is, like if that's what you're using, like even though that's way dumber than the state of the art, like the state of the art moving forward actually still helps you with that product.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, we've been using Gemini 2.0 Flash, which is like ancient history at this point. But there's now Gemini 2.5 Flash Lite, but it's still in preview mode, which means we have no idea what the rate limits are. So we just keep hitting it really hard. And it's like, well, it seems to be working, but if we switch production over to it, then who knows what will happen to our users. Yeah, Gemini 2.0 Flash is really dumb. But yeah, the fact that we have Claude 4 means that we can test like what a good model would do and compare and like find errors. So yeah, exactly as you say, Tyler, like the existence of a smart model makes it easier to build something based on a dumb model. You can also still use a smart model in production, even, you know, latency isn't a problem everywhere. Some things are relatively quick. You know, just output like a small number of tokens. You can wait 4 seconds for like Claude 4 Sonnet to do something, even though Gemini 2.0 Flash could have done it in 1 second. Yeah, no, again, this is a thing I've been reckoning with for the whole time I've been building with LLMs is when to use smart and when to use fast and what is the right balance between the two. I've tried many combinations. I don't really know what the answer is. It's just obvious to me that they both have value. And I think the best builders are able to somehow take advantage of both.
Yeah, Ray, do you have anything to share on simulations?
Nothing much. Yeah, I was just
Okay,
kind of like approaching it peripherally right now.
cool. I think it's a big topic. Simulations and evals are really interesting to me. I think we'll see a lot of. Eventually, it'll get like productized at some level, but that's probably when the alpha's gone. So try to build your eval now before it's a commodity. Cool. Let's talk about models on your phone. So I feel like this month I'm saving all my hot takes for this month. The humanoid robots, Cloud Code sucks. Now my third one is that like models on your phone is stupid. I don't really get it. I don't get why you would want that. I had a tweet that I was replying to Sam Altman's tweet where he asked like, when will we have an O3 level model on your phone? And I was just like, what is this stupid obsession? It was kind of a Twitter brained comment where I was kind of being intentionally provocative, but I was like, what is this stupid obsession with like running it on your phone? Like nobody says like, when will my phone just run a Google search without the internet? It's like, why would you care? Like, I kind of feel the same way about models on your phone. Maybe it's because I care more about like whether it's like actually smart. I just don't want to pay like $3,000 for a big, thick, hot phone that has like 3 hours of battery life. Like I just don't get it. I really don't get it. But I know there's a lot of people who disagree, and maybe there's like it's valuable for different types of problems, and like I don't want to say that there's one size fits all, but for me personally, it's not what I'm interested in.
Yeah, this isn't a hot take. This is like a I'm dumb take. But you guys remember the Rabbit R1 little orange device that they were
Yeah.
selling a year or two ago? I bought one because apparently for $200 I couldn't be bothered to read what it actually was, and apparently it just sends requests to GPT-4 just like my like actual phone or laptop. So like, what the hell is the point of the
Yeah.
device? But I thought it was like a little device that would have intelligence offline. I didn't think the intelligence would be that good, but I thought it actually was contained in the device. But it was just making network requests. I'm like, why did I like my phone does this? What's the point of this thing? But that was $200 burned. I regret that purchase. I was very excited that there was like a new form factor. But I agree. Like there are not smart models running on people's phones. Dumb models are not very useful. I'm with you, Tyler. Like what is the thing that's going to be enabled by this? Like why should I invest in a big hot like expensive phone to do what exactly? Like is it for when I'm traveling? That seems like kind of a niche use case. Like why do I need
Totally.
to be offline?
Totally. You're on an airplane, but it's like Starlink is coming to airlines. Like, why do I even care? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's just a little premature. I don't really. I mean, I don't know. There's a couple different ways. Like, I think about really low level problems, like some of the stuff I was thinking about from like a systems perspective. Apple, like 15 or 12 years ago, basically just optimize at the like syscall level. Like, if we're gonna keep the chip running, what other things can we also turn off and turn on at the same time so that like we can coalesce all the cycles together? So like, can we coalesce Bluetooth cycles? Can we coalesce Wi-Fi? Can we do all these types of things so that when we wake up the system to do one CPU cycle, we can just kind of gather everything up? And they learn that like you can save 2 to 3 hours of battery life on older computers that are like 8 years old. Just by doing this type of process. It's just literally just software, right? And all of that was like early machine learning. But that's like really cool low level, like, like at a bit level type of thing. It's a pain in the butt to test, but it actually works extremely well. And so when I think about these
Just for the
models,
audience, sorry to
yeah,
interrupt, Ray, but just
yeah,
for
yeah.
the audience, Ray worked at Apple and like built this. He's not just like reading about it. So just for context.
Yeah. I think about it makes me think about the intelligence of like, language models are like language in, language out. But like when you start to throw like system level things at it, in and out, right? And then you have chips designed around it to continue to improve that. Um, I think there is something that could be on the brink that we just don't really fully understand yet. And it's not at a language level like we're seeing today, like the parallel of server. It's literally just at the lowest level, right? So like when you think about like an Apple Watch, for example, like if it's doing a 1 hertz refresh, like it's just refreshing it, once a second, you can do a lot with these types of pixels, at those levels. Like it's like a whole nother like micro world of things that are going on with electronics that language models could actually really excel in, or these like smaller models that are doing, um, I don't know, like I don't think anyone's really mapped these tasks as something to be like observable and trainable into an LLM like structure. And I think Karpathy was sort of hinting at that when he left Tesla in some of his interviews. And the pieces that I pulled out was they were actually able to rip out a ton of code because they're now just able to just feed it through a neural net. And then now the neural net is actually making the decisions on everything else instead of having these decision trees written in C. And I was like, he dropped a gem there that no one's really actually talking about. And it's not really people who are researching it probably aren't really publicly publishing those types of works. But it makes me think if you're a builder right now, it could be something interesting to take a look into. It's like, how can you rip out code and then do some type of neural net thing for a specific task? And I think there's tasks that are all like vision related, right? They're just getting rid of all these other sensors and just using literally vision. And then, you know, uh, just taking it to like at the very lowest levels to like the actual metal can be a really interesting thought exercise in terms of products. And I think that's kind of where the breakthroughs will happen. like, yeah, I get more battery life now out of like a 10-year-old machine now. Because I threw this, like I flipped the llama model to do this now, or so I made like an even tinier model that runs at kilobyte size or something like that. I don't know. Like, it'd be interesting to see, what we can learn from all this stuff, because there is a lot of repeated patterns that happen at the very lowest level. And you're just like, yeah, all of this can be distilled down. I mean, separate from that, kind of, I'm getting kind of really into this conversation now, but um, like there's this mathematical breakthrough that can happen with like compression. And then like these, if you hire a mathematician to figure out these problems for like, how do we, solve this problem? We have all these packages and we build them this way. They can figure out to compress stuff down to like, save you 80% space, right? And like that could be a really big deal, but you just need the right person who understands math enough to understand like, enough engineering with your build system to do all these types of processes. And that like if you combine that, world level expertise with some language models, you can do some really cool stuff in the system if you just kind of let it autonomously, start looking for optimizations. For me, I think it'd be a really interesting field to explore if I was like really into hardware right now.
That's a really interesting take, Ray. I really appreciate that. And I think you too, Dan, not to put words in your mouth, but we're kind of thinking of it more in terms of like the current chat bot interface and like why would I do that on my phone? But you're totally right that like there are things that are very different shaped problems, but that something like a language model could actually be optimized for. That's really interesting.
Yeah, and I guess if we had our resident image model guy, Chris, on the forward pass, he might have something to say about that, because yeah, that's where all the GPUs and whatever fancy mobile chips for neural inference that we're getting now, they're all for your camera, right? Like they're for
Yeah.
processing of images and videos.
Yeah.
And there's some like really valuable stuff going on there already. Yeah, it's not, well, okay, I was gonna say it's not transformers. Like we have transformer image models now. So I don't know what's going on. Maybe there already are transformers running on my phone. But yeah, there's clearly like a huge industry behind putting neural various things. Yeah, like I don't know, I don't understand how bare metal works, so I'm out of my depth on this one. But this is already happening. So if there is a way to use that productively for other things on your device beyond just things related to your camera, like we're already on our way.
Yeah. This is a weird way to close the show, but like, why when I'm in like a low light situation and I take the photo, it has to like wait a second to take it. I understand that because it's like it needs to get all the light. But then why when I look at it on my phone, it's like 60 frames a second, like full quality, like in real time. Like I don't understand that gap. But I think that gap is actually just that they're doing a lot of really smart machine learning prediction on the camera. Like there's hardware that's dedicated to just that problem. But then when they actually take the photo, they need it to be like the real lighting and not just a guess or something like that. But it's amazing how good that is. It never looks weird or funky. It just like looks like me in a low light situation, exactly like the photo will look, which is incredible. So yeah, you're right that there is a huge amount of tech that goes into those cameras. And I think, the phones really haven't gotten that much better except for the cameras. Like that's the only place where the phones are really getting better now. So um, maybe Apple will pick up their game and build diffusion models somewhere in there. I don't know, but all right, guys. Well, we did an hour. I feel like we covered a lot. That was really great. Really high level discussion. So yeah, thanks for everyone listening. If you got this far, give us a follow, and yeah, see you next time.
Thanks, Tyler. Thanks, Ray. Bye.
So yes, thanks.